Welcome to Project Teachers Lounge.
Hello, Iris. Long time no see. Iris and I know each other from Rhodes College, hence the shirt. I don't know how we met at Rhodes, but I'm pretty sure it's the multicultural fair somehow, because I know we didn't have any classes together. But Iris was super nice. She's now a mental health therapist at a large university in Indiana. And she has agreed to sit down and talk to us today about her work during the pandemic. So welcome, Iris.
Thank you. And I noticed you repping the Rhodes shirt immediately. First thing I noticed.
And so how have you been?
I have been doing the best that I can, as we all are, trying to navigate just this last year and all of the abrupt changes and transitions and restrictions. But I feel like I'm doing pretty okay.
All right. And how long have you been working in education? What got you interested in education and mental health therapy, and what you do?
So I graduated with my master's in clinical mental health counseling in 2019, May 2019. So I have been working in the university setting, I guess, post-grad for about a year and a half. But even when I was in grad school, my internship was actually at the institution's student counseling center. And even before I got into grad school, I knew for a fact that I was interested in feeling out the college setting. I feel that, from my experience, as well as the experience of people I know, college is just an interesting, messy period of pretty significant growth and development, specifically within mental health. College age is kind of when a lot of mental health concerns that might have been latent will, kind of emerge because of the different stressors and just being on your own most of the time for the first time. So I don't know, it just intrigued me. And so far, I'm just enjoying walking alongside these young people and helping them figure things out.
Nice. All right. And are you you're not teaching, are you providing therapy services virtually? Are you in person? Are you hybrid? How's that working for you?
So currently we are sticking with teletherapy via Zoom. However, you can't always predict when a student will need a counseling session or mental health intervention. So occasionally we do have crisis appointments that pop up, and it's kind of without warning. So we'll be doing our thing, and then there will be a knock on the door from campus police with a student who needs immediate intervention. So in those cases, we do see them in person, but we do try and stick to some of those social distancing guidelines by seeing them in our waiting room versus our offices, because it provides more space for us to, kind of sit at a distance from one another.
Got you. And are students back in classes at your school?
Do you mean, are they
in person? Sorry.
Yes, they were in person this past fall semester. And as of now, the plan is for them to return towards the end of this month.
Okay. And so last spring, when the pandemic first started, did they send students home, or were they also just staying on campus for the rest of the semester?
Students were sent home.
And how did that unfold for you as somebody who's providing therapy to students?
Well, it was pretty chaotic. It was nothing that we could really be prepared for or that we could predict. And one of the biggest challenges was basically finding ways to be able to, continue providing those services through through a virtual platform that could be HIPAA compliant, because confidentiality is a huge cornerstone of counseling. We can't have random Zoom bombers coming during a confidential counseling session. So there was that. But then also just a lot of accessibility barriers that started popping up when students, went home, because there were just so many different concerns for different students. Some struggled to even find, for example, internet connection. Maybe they didn't have that at their home. So now going home, how do I find a space that is not in public that I can, use to be able to access my counseling session? There were privacy concerns for students who did have internet at home, but maybe felt just uncomfortable, especially if they were at a stage in their counseling where they were processing family of origin issues. It could be really uncomfortable to dive into that, knowing that family members were in the other room. And then for, in particular, marginalized students, there is a lot of just general widespread mistrust in, counseling. So this didn't help that with them not having the opportunity to come in person, feel your energy, know for a fact that things were confidential. So I would say that was just an added layer of hesitancy or resistance from those students.
Okay. Sounds like a lot to deal with in no preparation time. And you mentioned that, there are HIPAA compliancy issues. What were y'all able to figure out that was compliant for y'all to continue to provide counseling to your students?
Well, I am not exactly sure of the details of that, because that was something that, those directors essentially were kind of navigating behind the scenes. But I do know that we were able to get something worked out with Zoom where we could have a more just secure Zoom server. I don't know if that's what you call it, that could meet, those HIPAA regulations.
And so from the time that you all were sent home in March to August, what were some of the issues that students were dealing with in particular around what were some issues that they were dealing with from being at home?
So I just want to note that I actually experienced a job transition during the pandemic. So for a couple of those spring and summer months, I actually was not seeing students. But when this fall semester started, I would say the biggest thing that I took note of right away was increased levels of anxiety. And as of now, anxiety is the leading mental health concern that college students face. So just to see it heightened to this new level, it was very difficult. A lot of our students were honestly kind of traumatized, shaken by just the abrupt changes. A lot of them were, struggling with anxiety around being back to school in person, and just how that was going to go. Was there going to be another sudden, shutdown where they were sent back home? Were they going to, regret coming back in person? If, God forbid, they were to be exposed and get the virus. So there was a lot of anxiety about that, a lot of anxiety about just the future in general. How long is this going to last? Is this what my college experience is going to look like for, its remainder? There was a lot of just challenges socially, increased isolation. A lot of students found themselves pretty much like, especially if the majority of their classes were remote, they were sitting in their dorm rooms all day, which is just not really that healthy. So there was a lot of encouraging students to find things that they could do outside of their dorm rooms that allowed them to still feel safe, but could just help them have that change of scenery, maybe get some fresh air because that's good for your mental health, and navigating how they could still remain connected to their support systems and their social network in the midst of the pandemic. And I will say that for freshmen, that struggle was heightened because they didn't come in already having that network, that social network that they, just had to figure out how they could stay connected to. It was just different being able to establish those relationships early on when you don't have the traditional welcome week activities, social gatherings and visiting other dorms was prohibited, although that didn't stop, some of them. But I definitely saw that struggle heightened with the freshmen. And I know I've given a lot on this answer, but another thing that I think I saw a lot of was just grief and loss in so many senses, because for some it was grieving the actual loss of people in their lives who had maybe lost a battle with COVID or were just, extremely sick, hospitalized. But then also a lot of losses or grief around what they had dreamt their life would look like at this stage of life, especially again for those freshmen who maybe had been looking forward to planning, just thinking about college for several years, and then to come and to just know that they weren't getting what they've seen on TV, what they've heard their older siblings talk about. It was hard for a lot of them, and a lot of them, well, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'll say just from my caseload, a significant portion of them ended up either deciding to take this next semester off while they, waited in hopes of a return to normalcy, or if they didn't make that decision, they at least, it was on their mind. It was something that they were heavily considering.
Gotcha. And those students, so are there some classes that are in person, some classes that are not, and that leads to students being in their dorms virtually? Is that a thing that's happening?
Yes. Our institution had a kind of hybrid approach where some classes, were in person, but others, you had the option to come in person or to log on via Zoom.
Gotcha. Okay. And for those freshmen, what are some recommendations outside of get some fresh air and all that? How are you able to help their mental health stay up, knowing that they're not getting that experience that they dreamed of?
Well, like I said, a lot of it was problem solving, and just kind of facing the reality of, okay, this is what you don't have right now. This is what you don't have access to. But, what do you have access to? Because there were still opportunities available to them to socialize. A lot of the organizations and events were modified to be virtual. And so a lot of it was pushing them to be willing to try those opportunities, because a lot of them, I think, were kind of stuck with, well, I can't, do what I wanted to do, so I'm going to do nothing. But we would just process how that might play out for them, with their mental health. So yeah, a lot of it was just kind of that encouragement to be adaptable. I also think, going along the lines of problem solving, for some clients, we would literally spend a session creating a social schedule of these are the people I'm going to call, today, or these are the people that I'm going to FaceTime with today. So just kind of putting those intentions down as plans and part of their schedule to make sure that it was done.
Nice. And have you noticed any students, because, with the pandemic, a lot of jobs have gone away, people have lost jobs. And so students coming back to campus, like some work stuff probably isn't in place anymore, or as people worked off campus. Have you noticed students struggling financially, and how have you been able to assist them with these issues?
Yeah, I would say there were several students who began struggling financially, whether it was because they lost their job or, maybe it was their family. And I would say that for that concern, there was a lot of linking them to resources that could assist with that. I know within my institution, there were dollars that were allocated as, kind of emergency dollars to help students who might have been struggling. Because I can remember, students at the beginning struggling to get their books or their supplies for those, financial reasons. My institution also has a pantry. So a lot of that was just basically making students aware of the resources available to them and linking them.
And then, it's a little bit different. I mean, your students some of them are back in class, but it's still like there's more hands off. So I don't know how labs are working and all that. Have you found students finding this a difficult way to learn this semester in this new atmosphere?
Absolutely. The biggest thing that I heard students kind of complain about was just struggling with motivation and struggling to feel engaged. Again, while we have to work with what we have, for a lot of students, it was just hard for them to really connect when they weren't in person, or, they didn't have that built-in accountability of like actually getting up, waking themselves up, dressing up, and physically walking to their class. Another thing that I heard a lot of students talk about was feeling as though their professors were less accessible to them because a lot of office hours were canceled. So, if your email didn't get replied to, you just had to send another email and hope that the next would. And a lot of students, did get frustrated with that, just feeling like they couldn't get in contact with their professor when they needed to.
Okay. And for you, what are some, you're doing virtual counseling. What are some things you've had to adapt to work for your counseling sessions that you would normally do in person?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that when you are virtual versus in person, you lose a lot of reading of, body language and just those nonverbal actions that you would normally take note of in a counseling session. That would just help you have further insight into your client's affect, or just maybe, an emotion that has entered the room. So a very limited view of your client and their experience within the counseling session. Another thing that sometimes, called for adaptability was just that you weren't able to do physical activities, or let's say, for example, you have a certain worksheet or something that you would typically use with a client facing a certain presenting concern. You either had to, just maybe engage in more work to find a way to get that on your screen and to be able to share it with your client, or you just kind of had to find a different way to employ that intervention.
Got you. And on the other side of that, what are some things you learned through counseling virtual that you'll keep in place when you guys return to in-person counseling?
Give me a second to think.
And if there isn't one, there isn't one. That's fair as well.
Well, nothing came to my mind immediately, but I'm trying to just rack my brain in case there's something. Yeah, I got nothing.
Okay, that's fine. And thinking about those, you said you have those kind of crises where they'll bring a student to your office. How do you get through to those students that are like super high impact moments? How do you get through to those students in the moment?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
How do you get through to those students who are having a crisis moment that they brought to your office? Like, how does that interaction happen for you now?
Well, as I said earlier, there is a distance still, even though they're in person. And I feel like just even that can hinder the establishment of just kind of trust and, feeling your warmth. And just safety, I guess, being in a larger room and, sitting 10 feet apart versus 2 feet apart. That's the only thing that I can really think of. I don't know if you want me to add this in, but I just thought of another huge issue around transitioning to remote. Would you like me to share it?
Yes.
Okay. Another challenge was that our counseling licenses allow us to practice in the state that we are in, as well as in the state that our clients reside in. So for students who went home to different states, or maybe who live in different states and chose to do their whole semester remotely, unfortunately, that meant that we couldn't provide those services for them. So with those clients, it was a lot of helping to connect them with resources back home. Some states actually were really good about lifting certain restrictions or employing some kind of emergency, I don't know what to call it, but basically something that would allow us to temporarily provide services to clients who were out of state.
Gotcha. I would have never known that was a thing. I didn't know licenses were only based per state.
And that's a challenge in our field that a lot of advocacy work is centered around. We're really pushing for reciprocity so that, if I get a job in Tennessee tomorrow, I can just get there and start my job. But as it stands right now, I would be able to start my job, but I would have a time limit to apply with the state, prove my coursework again, prove my degree. In some states, even, take a whole nother exam. So it can get quite complicated.
Okay, I want to dig more into that because I feel like this is something that, I mean, I know nothing about, and I imagine other people know nothing about this. Is it because, I mean, when you practice medicine, do you have to get a license for that state, or is it nationwide? Do you know this? I mean, I don't know if you even know this. Um, but is it like kind of like going along those guidelines? Like, do you know the reasoning behind why you have a license in each state that you practice?
I'm trying to think back to grad school when we talked about this a lot. I'm not exactly sure, but something that I do know that could potentially have an impact on this is that certain degrees started being recognized by the state later than others. Like my degree, my master's in clinical mental health counseling is fairly new within the mental health world. I think the earliest was social work, so they're pretty established within all 50 states. But I remember actually looking into California because I love California and I plan on being there, 5-year plan. But I know as I was just looking at jobs out of curiosity, my degree is not really recognized there. So I think that maybe has something to do with why that is the case. And I'm not sure about medicine. Yeah, I'm not sure. So let me not even comment.
Got it. So basically, there's like state boards that manage all of like what is the qualifications and who can get their degrees qualified, and so that's like it's not a nationwide thing; it's more of a state by state.
Yeah, and they're even called different things in different states. So here in Indiana, I am currently a licensed mental health counselor associate because I have my provisional license. I still am getting supervised hours, and I have to take another exam to get my independent license in the next year or so. But if I were in Tennessee with my degree, I would be considered an LCP, which is a licensed professional. Actually, hold on. Or no, it's LPC, licensed professional counselor. So there even are, completely different titles for what I do in different states.
Interesting. Had absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. And just switching back to the work this semester, what was a bright moment for you? Like something that was like a highlight for you this semester?
I mean, I know there were some. I just have to think of a significant one that I can talk about. I think a general kind of bright aspect of this semester was how my colleagues and I showed up for one another. I feel like relationships were just nurtured in a way that that they might not have been if we hadn't embarked on this strange, complicated year. We had to be really intentional about building and maintaining that morale as a staff, and that connection that helps us to work in a just kind of fluid, team-like style. So there were a lot of built-in kind of social times, as much as our schedules could allow virtually, where we were able to learn about each other more and just, spend time giving each other space to check in with how we're doing individually, how this has impacted us and our families. An example that I can think of is that I am the type of person during lunch break who wants that to be me time. Like if you guys are, sitting in the conference room eating lunch under normal circumstances, I probably, just kind of want to be in my office, just, grounding myself and just taking time to myself. But this semester, one of our staff members implemented a Friday virtual lunch where we would eat lunch together via Zoom. And I found it to actually be really instrumental in feeling closer and building trust and what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, the word is escaping me, but so I'll just say trust for now, building trust and just connecting more with my colleagues.
I mean, I imagine it was valuable because this is your first semester in this position. So you probably didn't have the time, didn't get the chance to build those really close relationships. So I imagine that connection was great for you.
Yeah, well, it was my first semester as professional staff, but this is actually where I did my internship when I was in grad school. So there was already, some level of relationship among myself and the staff. But I feel like it could have been a much more isolated feeling semester had we not been intentional about planning our, Zoom team rapport building sessions.
Got you. And what would you say is the biggest challenge you faced this semester?
I think the biggest challenge that I faced was just balancing being this, this counselor during this time of crisis that our country was experiencing, and also being just a human who was also subjected to the crisis and, having to deal with the ways that my own life was impacted by the state of the country. I had to be even more intentional than counselors, really should be about their self-care, because I was experiencing my own losses, my own grief, my own financial struggles. And so it was really important for me to pay even more meticulous attention to how I was doing and what I needed to show up and be the best counselor that I could be.
And so just to roll into that, how has COVID impacted your family?
For me, I experienced a lot of transition during COVID. As I mentioned earlier, there was a job transition, which actually required me to move cities. So there was also just moving and struggles with, trying to find people to assist with that move when people were terrified to leave their homes. I also think, I experienced the same social challenges that my clients and pretty much everyone experienced, trying to find those ways to still feel connected and like a part of something while being physically apart from my loved ones and my friends. As far as how my family was impacted, thankfully, no one in my family got sick from the virus. However, it was very different this year. Like even this whole holiday break that ends tomorrow, I didn't go home to Tennessee, and that's a first, doing Thanksgiving on Zoom, Christmas on Zoom. You know, my family and I got together 2 nights ago for the New Year via Zoom. So I feel like, you know, just as much as my clients this year, I had to tap into some, you know, profound resilience and adaptability, creativity, and like I said before, just I had to be intentional with my self-care in a way that never felt as necessary as this year.
And speaking of, you know, you having to keep on yourself being intentional, what were you doing outside of being more intentional about your self-care? What were you doing to keep up your mental health?
Well, I am a counselor who is not opposed to nor ashamed to, you know, be in their own counseling. So, you know, I had my own professional support to help to just process and navigate all of the changes and the new experiences that I was facing. I had to find joy in the simple things. I had to, you know, remember just what I could do in solitude that makes me happy. With, you know, more alone time, I wrote more, I read more. I did a lot of artwork, which is, those things are things that, as much as I desire to have them be a part of my life and what I do, I'm often kind of neglecting them because, you know, I want to maybe, you know, be out with my friends or, you know, just, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of times we're distracted by those grander aspects of life, and we can be sometimes scared, sometimes resistant, and sometimes neglectful of just allowing ourselves to be still, to hone into our internal experience and to find time and ways to express them. And I feel like I did a lot of that this year. And I think it, you know, in its own way, it was another form of therapy, just kind of being with myself and listening to myself.
Okay. And next semester, what are your hopes? Or spring semester, what are your hopes just for the future?
Well, obviously, I hope that, you know, we can, our country can, well, the world, I guess, can make more headway in combating this pandemic. I don't expect things to return to normal as though the pandemic, you know, had not occurred. And I'm kind of okay with that for the reasons that I just said. But I am just hoping for myself and for others that we can continue to reflect on things that have happened this past year that maybe have come to our attention that we don't want to be so invested in. And then also the things that we have had to latch onto this year for survival that we do want to, you know, have more of in our lives. And that looks differently for every single person, but I just hope that, you know, we can individually and collectively continue to grow in our resilience, in our adaptability, and in our appreciation for one another and the importance of connection.
Got you. And we kind of spoke about your career. You want to be in California in 5 years. Has the pandemic altered your career aspirations? I know you're early in your career. You're post grad like a year and a half-ish. So has the pandemic kind of maybe informed more of what you want to do, changed your ideas for your career? Like, what does that look like for you now?
No, I don't think the pandemic has really had a significant impact on my plans. Currently, the plan is still to apply for doctorate programs this coming fall. So, hopefully within these 5 years, I will become Dr. Mosah. And
Has a ring to it.
what did you say?
Has a ring to it, Dr. Mosah.
Thank you. And obviously getting that degree will open up more opportunities for me. It will help me significantly financially because let me tell you, counselors are underpaid. And so, that's probably like the biggest thing or the biggest goal that I have for the next 5 years. And and I think that'll just continue to open, like I said, more doors to other goals and dreams that I have for myself.
Nice. I want to step back to a question that I passed over. In the spring and the summer and in the fall, there was a huge resurgence on Black Lives Matter and focus on police brutality because of what was happening in our country with the constant killing of Black people. At any point, did you have to have a conversation with students, colleagues? Did that come into your counseling where you had to talk to students about this, conversations with colleagues or administrators?
Oh, absolutely. I don't even know how I didn't bring that up. I guess I was more focused on the pandemic during this interview, but I mean, that going back to what a lot of students were dealing with in their counseling, I mean, the resurgence of that just added to all of those concerns that I mentioned earlier, the anxiety, particularly for students of color. And I would, even maybe specify that more and say Black students, African-American students. I just saw increased levels of anger and just kind of, emotional reactivity, exhaustion, racial battle fatigue, and to have to navigate all of that on top of the pandemic, and with those restrictions on just physically, socially gathering, it was the conversation that was had was that your mental health right now needs to absolutely be a priority. There is just so much going on, and if you don't make it a priority, it really truly could break you or take you to a dark place. I know that actually on my first day of my new job, at the end of the day, I already had an outreach scheduled to talk to a group of students at the African American Cultural Center about the impact of the death of Chadwick Boseman and just, kind of how they were being impacted by that. But in that dialogue, much of the discourse was also kind of around how that loss or that death was just particularly hurtful, given the hurt that they were already feeling around the racial dynamic of our country and the way that Black lives are valued or not valued in this country. So for a lot of them, they really, his life and his legacy symbolized making the most of life and achieving achieving dreams and goals in spite of adversity, being able to do both, struggle and suffer, and still, still live up to your potential, or, still find ways to leave an impact, a positive impact, in your community or on this world. So that outreach experience actually pretty much segued into that conversation.
Got you. And so, yeah, just a lot happening, especially just being a student at a time like this can be, it's a struggle, having to come back to what I imagine is a PWI and worry about.
It's actually more diverse. There's a lot of diversity. However, I feel as though there is definitely social division because we have a lot of inner city kids from Indianapolis who are typically students of color. And then we have a lot of white students who come from rural towns in Indiana. So it's definitely a modge podge of people and cultures.
Gotcha. And as a counselor, how are you able to work with students of color, knowing the disproportionate effect that it had on communities of color?
I think that one of the biggest resources that I employed was collaboration with other organizations and spaces on campus that really catered to marginalized students. One of the biggest ways that I did that was working pretty closely with the African American Cultural Center because that was kind of a safe space for them to be heard for their individual culturally specific challenges and obstacles to be recognized. And I'm really thankful for the center because they offered a lot of those practical resources that I myself as a counselor with ethical boundaries could not provide.
Gotcha. Okay, well that handles all of my questions, though I do have some Instagram submitted questions and some short answer questions that I'm going to hop into right now. The first Instagram submitted question is, are you okay?
Thanks for asking. I am okay. I'm doing the best I can. I know what I need to do to be okay. And I'm committed to doing that so that my life, my career can have longevity.
Nice. How has the pandemic widened the opportunity gap for your students?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
How has the pandemic widened the opportunity gap for your students? Well,
as mentioned, there is a disproportional impact on marginalized communities. So, I think we will see the effects of this pandemic and, all of those barriers and accessibility issues for a while, whether they be financial or even just the desire to be in college, given that this experience maybe wasn't as easy to navigate as they expected or was discouraging for whatever reason. I think that we're going to be fighting those effects for a significant period of time.
And how did you work with students who might have had a lack of access to technology during this period of time?
Well, again, that was a lot of linking them to those resources on campus, such as the dean of students who had control over those emergency funds, or let me just say the dean of students in that office who could assist them, with making sure that they had what they needed to be able to be successful this semester.
Gotcha. And how can individual people like myself or somebody on the street help education or mental health of students?
Maybe this sounds trite or corny, but I do think that just kindness and empathy and trying to understand goes a long way. As I said before, every single person is being impacted by the events of this last year in different ways. So I just think it's important for us to not judge, not project our own experiences onto other people, and to just listen and to try and be a light during what was a very dark year for a lot of people and a lot of communities.
All right. And what have been the best tools you've used to support virtual counseling?
Zoom, HIPAA compliant Zoom. Yeah.
Did your school provide resources to help you discuss anti-racism with students?
Yes. I forgot to mention this, but actually, right before I started my position here, a group of students led by the Black Student Association had released a list of demands for the institution. And I know one major thing that came out of that was the president's office releasing a strategic plan around diversity, equity, inclusion. So a lot of important opportunities for dialogue and discourse about how those three things manifest within our institution were born. And I mean, there have been steps in the right direction as far as systemic change.
Nice. Have you needed to relocate from your home to virtually work in a lower cost geography?
No.
Have your work, do you work in the office or do you work from home?
I work in the office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel at any point that your health was disregarded?
No.
And what has been the upside of online counseling that couldn't happen in a school setting?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah. What has been an upside to online counseling that couldn't happen with in-person counseling?
With in-person counseling. Well, I think that the fact that the pandemic forced the entire field to be receptive to, more receptive to virtual therapy has actually been a plus that could serve us even after the pandemic is no longer relevant, because I know before a lot of people within the field were just very opposed to virtual counseling because there were so many, ethical risks to it. One of the biggest, again, being that it wasn't the most secure form of meeting with your clients and adhering to those confidentiality guidelines. But now that, the pandemic happened and Zoom was able to find some way to make their servers more secure. Now it could be an option for people who had different kind of barriers that kept them from going to counseling, whether they were homebound or transportation was an issue, or maybe there wasn't an appropriate provider within proximity to them. I think after this pandemic, virtual therapy is going to be more appreciated and more utilized.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That's a huge plus for the advising community, for the counseling community, and for our therapy community, and for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Just for in person who's working with, talking to friends, trying to find a person of color to go to therapy, and there's like none in their location. But if you do it virtually, which I feel like I know a lot of people who do virtual therapy already before the pandemic, which is why I was like, oh yeah, duh, that's a thing that wasn't widely accessible. It's like, that's huge. So there are a few silver linings from this pandemic.
Yeah,
Just got to find them. So
right.
That's all Instagram questions, and now I have some questions I can answer in one word or a few words. What was your favorite subject in school?
Psychology.
Your favorite dish to cook?
I'm going to say my mom's sweet potato casserole.
Ooh. If you weren't a counselor, what would you be doing professionally?
I'd be either a dentist or an actress.
What is the best gift you've ever given or received?
Well, a couple days ago, my brother bought me my first iPhone, like completely out of the blue.
Okay. If you could only eat one vegetable for the rest of your life, what vegetable would it be?
Baby carrots.
Okay. Is a potato a vegetable or no?
No. And I just learned this off of playing Jeopardy last night.
Okay. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Is that even a question? Absolutely.
Okay. I thought you were going to say absolutely not. Like, okay, we can end this now. What is the most extreme thing you've ever done?
Most extreme. I've done extreme things. I'm just trying to think of what is the most and what is appropriate to say on here. Most extreme. I'm just gonna say acting on a TV show as a background actor.
And what TV show is this? What episode? What season? Where can we find it?
It was a show called Sun Records that was filmed in Memphis. It had one season on CMT, but the show was about the lives of Elvis and Johnny Cash.
I do remember this. I never saw it, but I do remember the show. What episode are you on?
I'm in a couple, actually. I did a few different scenes. I know I'm in the final episode. And actually, I didn't have cable, so I never even watched the show to see if my scenes made it.
Okay. Maybe I'll have to look at it and let you know if you're in the final episode.
Please do. Please do.
Are there any mantras that you live by? And if so, what is one of them?
Yes. My favorite mantra that I actually plan on getting tattooed like next week is less force, more flow.
Okay.
Do you want me to expound upon that?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah. So I love that mantra because it it reminds me to be in the moment and to trust that what is happening is supposed to be happening right now. I don't need to force anything. I don't need to force my future. If I can just be present in this moment and flow with what God is giving me, then I'm doing life right, and I will end up exactly where I need to be.
Okay. What do you think you spend too much money on?
Eating out.
Okay. What's your favorite restaurant to eat out at?
I don't have a favorite restaurant, but I love Indian food.
Okay. How would your best friends describe you in one word?
Free-spirited.
If you could recommend a book, a podcast, a TV series, or a movie, could be all four or just one of the four, what would it be?
I would recommend, this is so counselor-y of me, but I would recommend Brene Brown's Unlocking Ourselves. She has a lot of guests, a wide variety, from Alicia Keys to the former general surgeon of our country, who talk about all different aspects of mental health and being brave, being authentic, from their various different lenses.
Gotcha. And this is a podcast, correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool. What is your favorite movie?
Forrest Gump.
Okay. What is the best vacation you've ever taken?
San Francisco.
Okay.
I was in love, and that's where I want to move.
Okay. When was this?
2018. Because you even commented on one of my Instagram pictures, and you were like, "Oh, do you live here?" And I was like, "I wish."
Gotcha. Okay. Because I feel like most people don't say that when they visit San Francisco. That's why I was wondering what year that was.
Yeah.
What is important for those who do not know you personally to know about you?
That I have acceptance for all in my heart.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview before we conclude it?
No, other than I appreciate you embarking on this project and just being curious about and valuing the experiences of educators and counselors during this chaotic time.
No problem. If you want people to follow you on social media, you can tell them now, or I can delete this part later if you don't want them to follow you.
Yes, I can be followed on Instagram at Counseling Queen, Queen being spelled Kween.
Okay. Well, Iris, future Dr. Mosah, I want to say thank you for sitting down for this interview, providing your perspective on counseling and in higher learning. I think you're one of the only, if not the only, counselor that will be interviewed for this. So at least at the moment, so that you're providing a very unique perspective, letting us know like what students are going through on the mental side and what you're doing to help them get through this time, because it's a very difficult time for a lot of students. I appreciate you sharing what you're doing to keep up your mental health as a counselor, because I feel like that's something like I can say that I'm doing, but you're a professional at this, and you being open and honest, saying like I have my own person that I speak to that is a therapist. Like that is, everybody's still open to learn. So it's great to hear that from you. And yeah, just again, thank you for doing this, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
We'll have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.